It's a big week for politics at Holyrood. On Wednesday, the Finance Secretary Shona Robison will set out the Scottish Govt's draft tax and spending plans for the next financial year. Ahead of that, her boss, First Minister John Swinney, today visited Forth Valley Hospital, where he pledged to prioritise the National Health Service.
We've obviously faced a very serious and acute financial challenge over the last couple of years, most acutely in this financial year, where we've had to take some very difficult decisions about the priorities to enable us to balance our budget and to live within our resources. The Government will set out on Wednesday its financial plans. I want to make it absolutely clear to members of the public that the commitment I gave when I became First Minister, that I would do all in my power to strengthen our public services, particularly the National Health Service, will be fulfilled by the budget as we move forward, and we'll do everything in our power to ensure the National Health Service can meet the expectations and the needs of people in Scotland.
The SNP is in minority government at Holyrood. This means that if ministers are to get their budget bill passed, they'll require the cooperation of another party. Tonight we spoke to negotiators from the Greens and the Liberal Democrats. It's a party of minorities, so nobody can get everything they want. So, Ross Greer, what are the Greens' red lines?
The two top proposals that we made for the budget are one, a bus fare cap of £2 a journey and to reinstate the commitment to roll out free school meals for all primary 6 and 7 pupils. Those are the two top proposals. We've put a whole menu of options to the government, but in terms of red lines, the key things are at least £4.7 billion for climate and nature, because that's the amount that we delivered in the last budget when we were in government, and a real terms increase to the funding for local councils to ease the pressure on schools, care services, etc.
So your two red lines are different from your two top priorities.
Well, the £4.7 billion for climate includes projects like that bus fare cap. So we've got two top priorities. That's that amount of money for climate and nature, a record amount, maintaining the record amount from this year, and increasing the amount of funding for local councils. But within that, there's dozens and dozens of different ways to deliver it.
Willie Rennie, what are the Lib Dems' red lines?
Well, I'm not going to tell you, Colin, because that's going to be the matter of negotiations, private negotiations with the SNP.
We do have red lines.
Oh, we do, and we're going to meet with them tomorrow. We have put in, like Ross, a list of issues that we would like to be addressed in the budget. We want to see what's coming up on Wednesday, and then we'll make a judgment subsequent to that, depending on what the SNP say in the budget. But the issues for us are things like long COVID, making sure there's clinics for them, mental health services, dealing with the housing emergency, and of course social care and the NHS, which are on its knees, and that's why we need to have investment in those areas.
As it stands, what do you think of the chances of the Lib Dems backing the budget?
I don't know. I mean, I hope we can reach an agreement, because I think, as Ross said, it is the responsible thing to do. It's a parliament of minorities. We want to get things that our voters are demanding, and we will campaign constructively and work constructively to deliver those.
Do you think you can get a deal?
I think we can, but I think there's a long way to go yet. The SNP will have to move, and that's why it's important to see what comes in on Wednesday.
Do you think the Greens can get a deal?
It's possible for either of our parties here to get a deal with the SNP.
It's possible, but do you think you can get a deal? Are you expecting a deal?
At this point, it's very hard to tell. The SNP are playing their cards pretty close to their chest. But the key thing is they'll need to move out of their comfort zone here, because it is a parliament of minorities. The public didn't give them a single party majority, so they need to compromise with someone. The Greens' priorities here are continuing action to tackle the climate crisis and to lift children out of poverty. So that's things like the bus fare cap at £2 and rolling out free school meals to primary 6 and 7. If they can meet us on these kind of priorities, then a deal is absolutely possible. We've always tried to be constructive with the budget.
These were things that you kind of had in the Butte House agreement. That's no longer. Can you trust them to even deliver on them if they agree them with you over the next few weeks?
Now, the question of trust is absolutely key, because
it goes both ways as well.
It definitely does, but what we've made clear to the government is they'll need to come up with some kind of mechanism to ensure that we have confidence what we agree in the budget will be delivered. Because of course, once our MSPs vote for it, any leverage that we've got begins to disappear. The key point of leverage is the vote on the budget itself. If the first thing's to be cut from the budget in year because there's, say, an additional public sector pay deal to agree, if the first things that are cut to pay for that are green priorities, that would be a massive breach of trust. So before we agree any budget, we want a mechanism to ensure that we have a role in its oversight. And I would strongly suggest to the Lib Dems that they do the same thing, because the last 6 months since the agreement between the Greens and SNP ended have seen a whole range of priorities priority green projects be slashed by the SNP. That was a pretty significant breach of trust if they do want our support for the upcoming budget.
I think there's a point in that people are expecting this deal to happen on Wednesday when we get the budget, but there's no vote until February. So there's a bit more wheeling and dealing to be done after that, isn't there, Willie?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it wheeling and dealing, but there are discussions to take place. And I think the direction of travel of the government is really important, because for quite some time now, we believe that the SNP and the government have had the wrong priorities. And I think a symbol of that will be their approach to independence. And this is something that Ross and I disagree on. But it's not a huge sum of money they're spending on independence. But if they want to get across to the public, they're focused on fixing the country, then they should put aside spending on independence.
It's not like they've hidden the fact that they are an independence supporting party. It is their raison d'etre. It's what they're for. You can't, as a Democrat, you can't make them change their mind or stop that.
Colin, I'm not asking them to stop believing in independence. I'm just asking them to stop using government to advance the cause of independence, to put aside the spending on that. Because I think if John Swinney, he has been making a deal of the fact that they are focused on pragmatism and on the government.
There's not going to be a referendum next year, so does it really matter?
So put aside the money.
Ross Greer, where do you stand on that one? Because you've said that it's a red line almost in the other direction.
A majority of MSPs were elected on pro-independence manifestos. The democratic mandate for the Scottish Government to pursue the case for independence is there. It's what people voted for. And the Greens want to see the Scottish Government continue to advance that case. This is a fraction of a fraction, way less than 0.1% of the government's budget. But there's a democratic point here. People voted for the SNP and for the Greens to advance the cause of independence whilst tackling day-to-day issues. But there's a link between these two things. We can only do so much to tackle child poverty with the policies the Scottish Government currently has at its disposal. We need the full powers of a normal country to do things like raise the minimum wage.
But it will show that the government has not listened to the result of the election in July and is out of touch with the real priorities just now, which is to deal with all these emergencies that we've got going on, from the housing to the economy to social care.
But on that
will be a clear signal.
If the budget falls, then there would be no public sector pay increase, so no pay rise for nurses and teachers. There would be no increase in NHS spending. There would be no winter fuel payment for pensioners next year.
Absolutely.
But there might be an election. Would you both feel comfortable taking your parties into an election and explaining that to the voters?
I'm quite happy to have an election tomorrow, actually, because we're doing pretty well just now. But I think it's important.
Would you be happy to explain why there's no winter fuel payment, no public sector pay rise?
What I would prefer to do is for an agreement to be reached to make sure we can advance forward. But as Ross says, it's really important that the SNP understand that they don't have a majority by themselves.
Look, the Greens are polling higher than we were at the last election, but we're not eager for the next one to come because, as you say, there are consequences to not agreeing a budget. The fact that our two parties are here now shows that we're taking this seriously. Where are the Labour Party? The Labour Party have aspirations to govern Scotland. Their only proposal for the upcoming budget is to reverse a UK Labour policy cutting the winter fuel payment. At least we are constructively putting offers on the table to the SNP. They'll need to move out their comfort zone and agree with one of us.
But right now they don't have to, because you both think that you're going to get a deal, don't you?
Oh, we don't know.
But you think you are.
Well, and we're here to discuss these issues because we believe it's important that we put across Liberal Democrat priorities.
And more discussions with ministers tomorrow. Thanks both for joining us in Scotland Tonight.